And good afternoon, producer Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jersey Joe. How are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, heard you're getting a bunch of rain out there in Pennsylvania.
No, it's beautiful sunny skies right now.
Realized I saw a big cold front coming towards me. So anyway,
Oh, no. I mean, it rained all day yesterday. Glad I mowed the lawn on Saturday night.
okay.
How was your Saturday, speaking of?
Um, a little wet here. And by the way, we're doing this a day early. I'm going to be out of town on Tuesday night when we normally do this, so we're doing this on Monday. But which, by the way, makes this June the 9th. Um, so we're doing this a day early, so we're going to release this on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Anyway, it's the
But
situation,
wait,
Jerry.
wasn't Saturday a special occasion?
I had to celebrate the anniversary of my 39th birthday. So yeah, I had another one of those. Anyway, yeah, had a birthday on Saturday. Anyway, the situation with Jersey Joe, news and perspective you won't hear on TV. And boy, do we have a lot of news and perspective that you won't hear on TV. Um, we might abbreviate this a little bit tonight. I'm on a tight time schedule. Our quote of the week is from Economist Thomas Sowell, and you're actually going to hear him. I know we've quoted Thomas Sowell many, many times,
Mhm.
but you've never actually heard Thomas Sowell speak. And tonight you'll hear him talk about the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome. People are conservative, say, hey, everybody should have the equal opportunity. People are more socialists to say, no, everybody should have the equal outcome regardless of effort or talent. So he's going to talk about the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome. Stupidest thing I've heard all week. I think it was back on May something or other. The TSA said you have to have a real ID if you want to go use your driver's license to get through
Yep. Yep.
security. Well, a lot of people didn't get their real ID driver's license, and we'll tell you what they're trying to use instead of a real ID driver's license to get through airport security. It's the funniest thing I heard all week. I'm an engineer, and I
Yep.
came across a quick primer on how to translate engineering speak into plain English. A little humor today, as we'll do that. I know I shared this with you because I know you're an iPhone user, but we'll tell you about a secret programmable button on your iPhone that many owners don't know anything about. And I talked to a bunch of iPhone owners, and you were the only one who knew about that secret button. But if you have an iPhone, there's a secret button on your
Mhm.
iPhone that most owners don't know anything about. Um, Department of Education was created by Jimmy Carter in 1979. Well, we're going to tell you what's happened to educational achievement scores in the 50 years since that department was created. Um, we have another clip it seems like a weekly clip from our favorite Senator John Kennedy, and this is from last year when he was questioning the head of the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is the federal entity that insures your bank deposits up to $250,000. How they've been handling just a tidal wave of sexual harassment complaints in that organization over the past decade. It's more how they haven't been handling them. We'll tell you about an anti-gun activist who made up a story about a school shooting in Pennsylvania that he claimed he was involved in. By the way, do you know where Dallas, Pennsylvania is?
Yeah, it's up by Scranton.
Well, he claimed he was involved in a school shooting, and we'll tell you uh, why that's ridiculous. And then in the lead up to our taxpayer relief shot, we have two quotes. It's really quick. I think it's a 30-second clip. One is by a regional sheriff up in one of the Canadian provinces telling people what to do if they're confronted by home invaders. And then we have a U.S. sheriff giving people advice what to do if they're involved in home invaders. And the contrast between the two is absolutely stark. And then finally, this is one of our best taxpayer relief shots effort. Comes to us from Seattle, where an armed citizen, apparently there was a guy out in front of a hotel on the street, pulled out a gun, shot two people, and as he turned and ran away from where he had shot these two people, he encountered an armed citizen with a concealed carry permit who shot and killed him. A classic good guy with a gun story. It's a classic good. Remember, 3, 4 weeks ago, we talked about how the media tries to say that the good guys with a gun are a complete myth. Well, this is
Yeah.
a good guy on a public street taking down a thug. All right. So let's start with our old buddy Thomas Sowell talking about equal outcomes and equal opportunities. Here we go. Let me play this.
Confusion among the redistributionists is between opportunity and outcome.
And by the way, he refers to them as redistributionists. These are people, well, the rich have too much money. We need to take all Elon Musk's money and give it to the people. And he's referring to them as redistributionists.
And one of the examples I used in a recent column was that, when I was a kid, I briefly tried to play basketball. And I mean, I was lucky to hit the backboard, never mind basket. You know, we had just as much opportunity to play basketball as Michael Jordan had. You cannot measure opportunity by outcomes. And that's what the redistributionists insist on doing. Big confusion among the redistributionists is between opportunity and outcomes. And one of the examples I used in a recent column was that, when I was
And I just wanted to replay the beginning again. And and he's talking about, they, by the way, the big thing, remember we talked about 2 months ago about everybody's complaining wealth inequality, the rich have too
Right.
much money, the gap between the middle class and the wealthy is too big, and they refer to wealth inequality as a bad thing. I don't know if you remember, we talked about wealth inequality, that wealth inequality is actually an unavoidable symptom of a healthy capitalist economy.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's because you have the opportunity to become what Obama referred to as life's lottery winner, that people take these insane risks. And they become, he called them lottery winner. I call them people who took insane risks. By the way, I just watched a 3-part thing on Walt Disney, and 3 times in his career, I mean, he was hanging by a fingernail
Yeah.
and gambled everything he had to preserve the Walt Disney Studios. Um, and he's not unique in that respect. You look at the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. These people took insane risks. Even, I worked for Carrier Air Conditioning for 20 years. Willis Carrier mortgaged his house, everything he had. He borrowed friends, family, to finally get his air conditioning invention, patented in production. So, um, again, wealth inequality, I think, is a healthy thing. If you don't have wealth inequality, that means you're either in North Korea,
Hmm.
you're in China, you're in Somalia, you're in, that's the only place you're not going to find wealth inequality. The more prevalent wealth inequality is, uh, outside of I mean, don't worry, let me back up. Within a dictatorship, yes, those at the very top, the political leaders will always have money. But if you're looking for broad wealth inequality, in other words, let's call it the top 10%, whatever. If you've got a top 10%, that means you're in a healthy economy.
Hmm.
And by the way, the people, what we qualify as poor in the United States, if you're poor in the United States, you have central heat, central air conditioning, running water, flush toilets. That's poor. That makes you upper middle class in the vast majority of the world. You'd be upper middle class. But there are people living in thatched roof huts with a dirt floor. That's
Hmm.
poor. And they have to go outside and poop in a hole in the ground. That's poor. So no, we have very few truly poor people in this country.
And it's sad because we do have a lot of homeless people in this country, but there's, a lot of a lot of it stems from mental health crisis too.
Right, drug addiction or mental health crisis, right.
Mhm.
But if they wanted to, they could be housed. By the way,
Mhm.
there's a difference between unhoused, you can be homeless and sheltered.
Yes.
Homeless doesn't mean living on the street. There are
Hmm.
homeless people who have a bed to sleep in every night. They're sleeping in a Salvation Army or some sort of shelter or a church shelter. So there is it, but those people who are homeless and unhoused, the vast majority of them either don't want to be sheltered, or they have a drug addiction, or they have a mental health issue. But again, but the vast majority of what are referred to as poor people, those living close to what the U.S. defines as a poverty level, are still living in the equivalent of an upper middle class income in most parts of the world. Um,
Hmm.
Anything you want to add to that before we move on? Nope.
Now, and we talk about the mental health crisis with respect to the every time there's a shooting too, that 9 times out of 10 you can take that back to a mental health crisis.
Yep. Yeah. Somebody was struggling with a mental issue. All right. All right. You want to move on to the stupidest thing I've heard all week?
Yeah, what's the
Have
stupidest
you
thing you
heard
heard was
have you heard this?
uh, no, I can't I can only imagine what people are trying to use to get through TSA.
Their Costco membership card that has their picture on it.
Now, even if you didn't get your real ID, if we're still using regular driver's licenses, how does the Costco membership get you through
I don't
TSA?
know.
Like, why would you just
But
not use your regular driver's license?
I don't know. But it was on the news. It was on the news yesterday. I think I saw it again this morning. And just Google Costco, Costco membership card TSA, and you'll
Mhm.
find story after story after story. How stupid do you have to be to think, well, they're not going to accept my regular driver's license because it's not a real ID, but maybe they'll accept my Costco
Yeah.
membership card.
I'm curious to know the they put this law into effect back in what was it, May? Was it May 5th or June 5th? I don't remember.
Well, it went into effect that they've been pushing. It's supposed to have gone in effect 2 years ago. They kept pushing it back and
Well,
pushing it.
actually, I'm on my second real ID. I've had a real ID now for 5 years. I had it because it's in Pennsylvania, your driver's license is good for 4 years. So I had the original real ID 5 years ago. It expired last year, and I got my second one this last
Right.
Christmas. But
Well,
there's still TSA is still allowing people to fly without a real ID and without a passport.
yeah, but you
They're
have
just
to go to
having to
some.
go through,
Yeah, you
an
have to.
extra secondary screening.
Right.
So when are they going to truly enforce the passport or the real ID?
I have no clue. I wouldn't want to bet money on that.
As a matter of fact, I have a passport card, which is also good, by the way, to
Yeah.
fly.
Right. Yeah. So I wouldn't bet money. I mean, that's a typical government. It delayed for 2 years, and even now, when it was supposed to be in effect, they're still making exceptions.
And I am hearing crazy stories, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, of people waiting for weeks, months, weeks, hours to get through. I will say that this past Christmas, I went into the DMV to get my renewal, my real ID. I was literally in and out in less than 5 minutes, and I
Yeah.
went middle of the day, middle of the week. I went on a Wednesday, middle of the week. I went middle of the month, so it was like
Yeah.
December 15th on a Wednesday at lunchtime at noon.
Yeah. The
I
only
was
problem
literally in and out in 5 minutes.
The only problem in New Jersey is not the amount of time it takes to get it. They were doing it by appointment only, and
Mhm.
people who were going, a friend of mine was going on a trip. Fortunately, he had a passport. The first available appointment was like 6 weeks out. That's how
Oh,
many people were trying
yeah.
to get their real ID. So it wasn't a question of how long it took to get it once you got through the door. It was getting through the door. So,
Yeah, I don't know if there's appointments now in Pennsylvania, but when I got mine back in December, I did not need an appointment. I just simply walked in.
okay. Well, good. All right. All right. You've got an engineering background yourself, right?
Yep.
Well, I'm going to describe some things in engineering speak, and you tell me if you can figure out what it was. So, if I told you the problem was a high impedance air gap, what do you think that meant?
Mm, that's a good question.
Means I forgot to plug it in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, how about if I told you that I performed a percussive maintenance procedure?
You fix something?
I hit it and it started working. Um, how's about this? How about the breaker trip because it became organically grounded?
You fried it?
No, I got shocked.
Oh, you got shocked.
It became organically grounded. On these ground GFIs, they'll show
Yeah.
up at the ground GFI outlets like next to your bathroom sink or
Yeah.
kitchen sink. Yeah, the slightest little thing will cause it to trip.
Hmm.
So if I say it became organically grounded, meaning I got shocked. So then there's another like it became thermally reconfigured, meaning it melted.
It
Uh,
melted, caught fire.
experienced thermal shock. That means it burned up. So those are your engineering to English, translation. All right. So let's talk about the secret iPhone button. Most people don't know this, but I know you do.
Hmm.
On the back of every iPhone, there's an Apple logo,
Hmm.
right? Looks like, the Apple.
Yep.
Well, if you that is programmable. If you go into settings on your phone,
Hmm.
you can program it to do different things like, turn on your camera or turn on your flashlight.
Hmm.
And all you have to do is I guess touch it and hold it for a second or two
Yeah.
seconds.
Or tap it. You can do like a double
Or
tap.
tap it. Now, most people put a case on their iPhone.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna say, so that's the problem. So I have an iPhone. If you're watching the video, you can see, but like you said, most people have a case, so I can't tap that. I can't tap the logo because the logo is right here.
I did go online. I did see cases where the Apple, where they have a hole for that.
Yep.
But if you have an Apple iPhone and you have something you use all the time, like a flashlight, or if you want to take a camera or activate your camera, You can program the Apple logo on the back of your iPhone case to be a quick access button. So
Mhm.
there's your little secret stuff for today. All right, let's talk about Department of Education. And we didn't talk about they've spent over, did we talk last week how they've been spending $150 billion a year for 10 years to get people to
Mhm.
go to college, to get underprivileged kids to go to college? We
Yeah.
talked about, all right. Well, this is phase two of that. So, um, Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education in 1979, and since then we've spent several trillion dollars. Well, back in just prior to 1979, 58% of 9-year-old kids could read at or above grade level. Now let's fast forward 50 years. So several trillion dollars and 50 years later, instead of 58% of 9-year-olds reading at or above grade level, only 33% of kids in of the eighth graders um, can now read at or above grade level, and only 70% of sixth graders were rated as proficient. So, I mean, that is stunning. Your reading proficiency has dropped by more than half, in one case, more than two-thirds, despite all this money we've been spending. And by the way, that's back when the ratio of administrators to teachers was like 1 to 6, and
Mhm.
today it's 1 to 2, and in some cases 1 to 1. So
Mhm.
we've got all these different administrators, and yet our can you imagine that only 31% of eighth graders can read at or above grade level?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not okay.
All right. So how does San Francisco uh, want to deal with this? Well, they have a new grading system. They've implemented a new grading system. By the way, when you went to school, to get it what was the minimum score you could get on a test and still pass it?
C.
No, a numeric score
Oh, 70, 70.
okay. Well, that's the way it used to be, but San Francisco's said they will now award scores as low as 41 on a 100-point test with a C, and students, as long as they have a 21 or 21, will get a D, will pass with a D.
That's not okay.
I mean, remember we played that last week that the two girls they couldn't answer the question 80 miles an
That
hour?
and that was sad. I mean, those were, college age girls. Yeah.
Right. And for those who didn't hear it, the guy asked these two girls, they were both college age, which means I don't know if they were in college, but they were clearly out of high school. He said, if you're in a car traveling 80 miles an hour, how long will it take you to
Mhm.
go 80 miles? And one girl saying two, the other girl saying 2.5
Yeah.
hours, and they're arguing whether it's 2 or 2.5. Clearly the answer is an hour.
Yeah.
But
80
so
miles per hour.
miles per. So the issue is, you know, if this is what the Department of Education is doing, I think it's time to scrap it and start over, because clearly it's failing. And
Mhm.
again, for San Francisco to say, well, if you get a 22 on a 100-point exam, you'll pass with a D, and if you get a 41, you'll pass with a C.
No.
We're just basically pushing kids through the system.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
mean, that followed like the No Child Left Behind.
yeah,
That was
well,
not the point of No Child Left
child
Behind.
left behind. Yes.
The
No,
point is to give them the help that they need so that they can move
right.
ahead.
And be productive and be absolutely productive. All right.
And it's a
Um,
snowball effect because then, have them advance through school, not leaving them behind, but not just pushing them ahead
right.
so that they can be, contributing members of society so they can get a job and support themselves and not rely on welfare.
Yeah. And if you're not good at math or something, you can do stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no trade, but you can be a welder, you can be a plumber, copper pipe and PVC pipe. If you're not good at, some people just aren't good at math, but there's a lot of trades you can learn that don't require, strong math skills.
And I'll
Um,
say, we've talked about this a few times way back about, people with disability and all the, I work with a lot of people with disability. Everybody has something to contribute. Unless you
yep,
are completely a vegetable in a bed, everybody has something they can
they
contribute to
can contribute.
society.
Yes. But it's so sad. Our education, but I mean, these test scores and these accommodations, these compensations, it's just further proof that our education system is broken and needs to be, uh, revisited from top to bottom. All right, you want to add anything else before we move on to my favorite senator?
Yeah, who? Oh, John Kennedy.
John Kennedy, Louisiana. Now, this is from last year. And again, the FDIC is a Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This is the federal organization that guarantees that even if your bank goes belly up, you'll still get your money back up to 250,000. And for years, it's been a rat's nest of sexual harassment and abuse. So here he's interviewing the head of the FDIC under Biden, and here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Romero, I know you've read the Cleary-Gottlieb report. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
I watched a lot of powerful people in this town try to cover it up. They said, oh, it's bad, but don't worry. The FDIC chairman will fix it. This was the same FDIC chairman who had been at the agency since God was a corporal and under whom all this stuff happened. And fortunately, that point of view didn't prevail. Here's the way I read the report. 97 people at that agency reported 145 separate incidents of sexual assaults. 91 others reported 141 separate incidents of gender or sexuality-based discrimination. 187 people reported 320 separate incidents of verbal abuse.
Now, but you hear the first one, 97 people, 140 incidents of sexual harassment. These are not isolated incidents.
Over 500 people, about 10% of the people at the agency, came forward about discrimination, harassment, mistreatment they faced at the FDIC. Now, I listened to you say all the right words. And you talked about accountability. And you talked about refurbishing the tarnished reputation of the agency. And you talked about listening. And I appreciate all that. But the phrase that got my attention was send a clear message that this won't be tolerated. If you want to do that, what you need to do before you do your listening tours or all that other stuff, you need to investigate every one of these allegations, every single one, and find out if they're true. And if they are true, then somebody ought to be, the person who's responsible should be fired, should be sued, and or should be prosecuted. And then you'll have a cleaner agency. Now, I don't have any questions. You're either going to do it or you're not. But I think a lot of the members of the committee agree with me. We're going to be watching.
And I'm going to cut it off there, but isn't that, I mean, who would have imagined that there was that much sexual harassment and going uninvestigated and unpunished?
Yeah.
By the way, I've run big companies, and the clearest way to send a message is you fire somebody's ass. You do an investigation, you verify was the claim true, and then you fire them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the clearest. That's how I know to send a clear message. I think after if you fire two or three people for breaking the same rule, pretty much people start to think, well, they're pretty serious about their rule. On the other hand, if it gets around that so and so did it and he got a slap on the wrist, what message does that send?
Exactly.
That it's okay, nothing bad's going to happen. So why not try it? So I think Senator Kennedy's absolutely right that they need to investigate those types of things, and then make some examples out of some people. All right, let's move on to clear. When we talk about our taxpayer relief shot, frequently they're home invasions, right? Where the resident of the home, shoots and kills a good guy. Well, apparently there's been a surge in home invasions in some of the Canadian provinces, where intruders are breaking into homes in the middle of the night because they want the key fobs to the cars. They want to steal your car in the driveway, and they want your key fob, so they break in the home And in some cases, they've gone into people's bedrooms and, with guns, where's your key fobs?
Mhm.
So here's the advice of a Canadian sheriff telling people how to handle this rash of home invaders looking for key fobs versus how I think it's our favorite sheriff from Santa Rosa County, how he suggests people handle it. So the first voice you're going to hear is the Canadian sheriff telling people what to do, and the second one is the Santa Rosa County. Here we go.
It's the possibility of being attacked in your home. Leave your fobs at your front door because they're breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else.
If somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. We have a gun safety class we put on every other Saturday. And if you take that, you'll shoot a lot better and hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
So I'm going to play that. So the first sheriff is saying, well, they're coming into your home to get your key fob. So just leave your key fob somewhere by the front door to make it easier. That they won't come up to your bedroom. And then we have Santa Rosa. I'm going to play it again. Here we go.
To prevent the possibility of being attacked in your home, leave your fobs at your front door because they're breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else.
If somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. We have a gun safety class we put on every other Saturday. And if you take that, you'll shoot a lot better and hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
So how sad is it if you're a citizen in Canada and the sheriff is telling you just leave your key
And I
fob?
would think because so much of Canada is very wilderness, unless you're living in Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver, which are the big cities, you're out in the wilderness. It'd be many minutes before the police come. If they even have, their local sheriff's probably like 50 miles away.
Yeah. Well, but again, the problem is not out in Saskatchewan. The problem is in places like Toronto and Quebec, in the big cities. That's where all the carjackings are taking place. So, and again, by the way, Canada has some incredibly tough gun laws, particularly when it comes to pistols.
Mhm.
So how sad is it that the sheriff is saying, just assume just assume, and just make your key fob available so they don't have to come into your bedroom to get it.
Yeah.
How sad is that? So, all right, how much time we got left?
Maybe about 7 minutes.
All right. Well, you just heard Sheriff Santa Rosa County. Let's go back to Sheriff Grady Judd and give you his take on home invaders.
But we have received information in social media that some of the criminals were going to take their criminal conduct into the neighborhoods. I would tell them, if you value your life, you probably shouldn't do that in Polk County, because the people of Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and they're going to be in their homes tonight with their guns loaded. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns.
Probably wouldn't get elected as a sheriff in Canada. What do you think? Or maybe he would get elected. Probably not. All right. So let's go to our taxpayer relief shot for this week. And this is a class, and we call them taxpayer relief shots because, as the sheriff of Santa Rosa County said, when you shoot and kill the thug, at $80,000 a year in prison and $200,000 for a trial, you just say the taxpayer's $1 million.
And to be clear, it does need to be justified.
Right. And there was some question last week about Dunkin' Donuts, whether that guy was in the right for chasing after the thugs, he could be in trouble because he was not in danger. He put himself in danger. But this is clear case, guy walking down the street, mind his own business. He witnesses a shooting, and a guy comes running towards him with a gun in his hand after he just saw this guy shoot two other people. So here we go.
Investigating a shooting in downtown Seattle, just outside the Four Seasons Hotel. Police say a private citizen stepped in and shot the suspect.
King 5's Drew Andre is there live this morning where police are still on scene. Drew, what can you tell us about this?
All right, well, it happened at 10 o'clock last night, Shantae, and the way police described it was there was some sort of altercation. We still don't know exactly what that altercation was, and it led to a shooting. It involved three people. They say one man shot two others and then started to flee the scene. And when they did that, they say another person stepped in and shot and killed the shooter, the suspect in this case that they're considering. They say that That person who shot the suspect is cooperating with police. Let's show you some video from on scene. Things have wrapped up on scene as far as the investigation goes. But earlier, we could see crime scene investigators. There were a number of evidence markers that had been placed around. All of this is just outside the Four Seasons Hotel, so at the corner of First and Union. We even saw a shoe that was there, along with a number of shell casings. Police say they still don't know what led up to that altercation that led to the shooting, but once that suspect fled, they described it as a private citizen that shot the suspect. Police say they've interviewed that private citizen. They are licensed to carry a gun and have, again, cooperated with police. We do know that young people were involved in this initial shooting, including an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, who right now, 2 victims are still in the hospital at Harborview with some serious injuries. Reporting live in Seattle, Drew Andre, King 5 News.
So how was that for a classic good guy with a gun?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. All right. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Nope.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast, for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about the things I find of interest and importance. And I hope you found them as interesting and important as I did. If so, I hope you continue to listen. If you want to see some of the show materials and story links you heard me talk about today, give producer Susan a couple days, and you can find them on the Jerzee Joe website at jerzeejoe.com, with Jersey being spelled J-E-R, as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, J-E-R-Z-E-E, jerzeejoe.com. And if you want me to send them directly to you, if you want to get on the distribution list where we can send you the podcast directly, you just send me an email to joe@jerzeejoe.com. Just remember to spell Jersey with an R, a Z, and 2 E's. And with that, producer Susan, anything else you want to add before we
Yeah,
sign
so you
off?
said you were going to be out of town, but are you still going to be on the radio on Thursday night?
Yes, I'm going to be on the radio Thursday night in Denver at 7:05 Eastern, 5:05 Mountain Time Thursday night for half an hour.
Sounds good.
All right?
Yep.
All right, producer, talk to you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.
You too.